All right, let's go ahead and get started. So there are only a few things on the agenda today, but they are quite large discussion points. Let's start out with a quick update about the coordinator. So the coordinator spec is now completely public. That's linked to on the forum in the agenda for this meeting. And in addition to that, the actual coordinator server reference implementation is also public. The contracts are live on mainnet and I believe Kovan. The contracts are totally usable and their API is stable at this point. But we will be deploying a slightly updated version that should just be a little bit more gas efficient. But if you do want to test it on mainnet, that will work at the moment. So please, anyone who's interested, give this coordinator server a spin, break it, see if you run into any issues, and yeah, feel free to give us any feedback. Same thing with the spec. Nothing has really changed in terms of what is included in it or anything in the spec. But yeah, does anyone have any questions on that? Or also curious if anyone has already had a chance to mess around with any of this? All right, perfect. Well, we will keep everyone in the loop for when the final contracts are deployed, and then those will also be deployed on all of the various test nets. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was 0x Mesh. So in last month's dev meeting, I briefly mentioned that we were working on a peer-to-peer network for transporting orders amongst relayers that is intended to serve as a replacement for the standard relayer API. People didn't really have time to digest during that meeting, but hopefully everyone has had a chance to check out the blog post we released a few weeks ago. We also did a mini presentation where Alex talked about the actual implementation a bit. I don't know if people have had a chance to check that out. But yeah, curious if any questions have come up since then, or if anyone has any thoughts, concerns, comments. Nothing? All right. For all the relayers out there, are you intending on using this, or does this seem promising?
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Austin.
Yeah, I was going to say from Open Relay's perspective, I think that we definitely do intend to support it. Whether or not we would support it right away depends on how easy it would be to integrate with our existing systems. But I mean, in general, as a way of potentially sharing liquidity with different groups, it seems like it makes sense.
Yeah, and whatever API you currently use, probably SRA in your case, you can continue to use that, but just kind of interact with 0x Mesh in the middle there. And it seems that most relayers do want certain custom aspects of their APIs. So yeah, I kind of imagine relayers will continue to have their own APIs and just be kind of interacting with this on their own backends.
Yeah, I was going to say that's kind of similar to us in that, we're happy to adopt a standard, but we do need kind of custom integrations on our end in order to provide well, in our case, like the AI services that we're also building in parallel.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Any other thoughts on 0x mesh? Does anything need clarification? Cool.
Yeah, I guess rough timelines, Amir. We're thinking towards the end of Q2 for the release of 0x Mesh.
Yeah,
Yep.
so there'll be a beta around the end of Q2, where that's when we really want people to try it out, more as an experiment to make sure that everything works as intended. We can tune some of the parameters to get the network working the way that we wanted it to. And we're thinking roughly like a more production ready where we want people to pump all their traffic through it, like end of Q3.
Alex, what do you think the timeline looks like for getting this in a semi-usable state and open sourcing it before it's actually production ready?
We'll probably open source the repo pretty soon. I don't want to make any promises, but like we do have some code there already. It's kind of being built piecewise, so it might be a little bit before you have something that's like totally ready to go, but there's a lot of code there already, so we'll probably open source it soon.
Cool.
There'll also be an architecture doc which goes into a lot more detail about some of the technical decisions, and it talks about how the protocol works. That'll also be releasing pretty soon.
Cool. All right. Before we jump into this last point, which I think will be the biggest topic of today's meeting, I want to just talk a little bit more about some of the progress we're making on V3 in general. So most of the updates in V3 are planned to be relatively small. It's going to be like areas of improvement in V2, making things a little bit more efficient, user-friendly, kind of catering some of the functions more to the relayer's needs, such as match orders, making things a little bit more developer-friendly as well. So we plan on releasing ZIPs for sort of each major feature that goes into V3, and it'll most likely look like a ZIP where people can discuss these issues, and then there will probably also be some code actually merged into our V3 branch at roughly the same times the ZIPs are released. And I would just consider that entire branch pretty experimental until it's kind of officially approved by everyone in the community. But yeah, I would say before next dev meeting, we'll have a longer list of all the features that we've kind of been getting requests for, and try to get feedback on that as well. All right, so with that, we will jump into ZIP 28. So Philip created a ZIP that proposes removing ZRX as the fee token within the protocol. This has been a pretty consistent point of feedback. Seems like generally people just don't like using the token as fees. It adds a lot of UX friction. It also adds a good amount of technical friction, in that it's pretty hard to price fees and things like that. It's hard to say how this actually looks in practice because very few relayers are actually charging fees at the moment. I think part of that is because of the UX hurdles associated with it, and part of it is just user acquisition. But to this day, not very much ZRX has actually been used for fees. I think it's something around $10,000 throughout the protocol's lifetime have been charged for ZRX fees. So we will be releasing a proposal, and as part of that proposal, ZRX would be removed as the fee token in version 3. Instead, an order would contain 2 additional fields, which would be maker fee asset data and taker fee asset data. And these would just be the exact same format as the current maker and taker asset data fields. And this would allow anyone to charge fees in any arbitrary asset that is supported within the protocol. So you could charge fees in Ether, DAI, CryptoKitties, whatever.
Multi-asset proxies?
Multi-asset proxy, 1155 proxy, anything. So yeah, should be pretty interesting. I would guess that most people would default to either using wrapped Ether or charging percentage-based fees. So if if your maker fee asset data is the same as the maker asset data, then you're essentially just charging a percentage fee there. And that actually simplifies things a lot when you're developing, I would say. So that's kind of the first part of the proposal. And then a bit separately for that, we'll be proposing a new use case for ZRX. Greg, are you on the call right now, or Will?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Do you want to discuss that?
Yeah, so maybe I can go through the draft of the proposal, and then Greg can kind of discuss how the smart contracts are put together. Cool. Okay. I'm gonna share my screen then. Cool. Is that working?
Yep.
All right. Cool. All right. So this is a draft that we're working on, and it's going to go out this week. But basically, I just want to walk through the main points with everyone on the call first and get feedback. But yeah, so we're putting out a proposal for new network economics. It's a proposal, and it's also a request for comment. So we want to be very explicit about the fact that this is something that we think makes a lot of sense, and we've spent a really long time thinking about this kind of liquidity incentivization problem, and we feel like we have a pretty solid solution to offer now, but the community has to be supportive of the idea, and it has to make sense. So if we go back to when the ZRX token was first being designed, the idea was that it's a governance token. It is used to vote on upgrades to this system of smart contracts, and there needs to be a way to make sure that these tokens are in the hands of users. We want this to be a user-owned platform. And we spent a good amount of time looking at different ways that we could structure network economics to kind of create overlap between the people that are using the protocol and the people that are governing the protocol. And basically it turned out that the most pragmatic solution that we could come up with at the time
was that people would pay fees to relayers in ZRX. And so this was kind of before the whole ICO boom had, you know, gotten out of hand, and, you know, there were tokens for everything. So at the time, you know, I think we were pretty naive, but at the time, you know, our thinking was that, okay, if someone wants to trade on a relayer, they'll have a handful of these ZRX tokens in their wallet, and, you know, it's pretty, you know, reasonable to assume that people will just kind of have some tokens in their wallet to pay for fees, etc. And yeah, I mean, I think we like very, very quickly learned that adding usage tokens, or basically forcing, you know, new users that are onboarding to, you know, an already complex product, it just is not good for user acquisition at all, and it just creates friction. And so that, you know, that's feedback that we've gotten from relayers, from traders, from market makers. And, you know, we've been hearing this feedback for a long time, and we've been working on, you know, developing an alternative for a long time. But we really didn't want to, you know, we really didn't want to like change anything until we felt comfortable that we had a replacement. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So just to kind of provide a little bit more data about, you know, how are we aligning incentives with the ZRX token between the users, the people that are actually trading, and the token holders, the people that own these tokens. So if you look at, you know, these two groups today and their overlap, that's what you see in this Venn diagram. You know, there's like 25,000 people that have been trading on ZeroX protocol. 10% or so have been, you know, have some amount of ZRX tokens, and there's a massive amount of token holders that have never completed a trade. Now, of course, these are unique Ethereum addresses. You know, people have multiple Ethereum addresses sometimes. Sometimes they use one address for trading and they use the other for holding assets. So this isn't perfect, like a perfect measurement, but I think it's pretty clear that the ZRX token as a fee, it has not properly aligned incentives between these two groups. And if we are to look even closer at this data, so each dot on here represents a unique Ethereum address, and on the x-axis we see how many ZRX do they own in their you know, at that wallet address, and then on the y-axis is the number of trades they've completed. And, you know, so our thesis, I guess, if we were to just kind of express it in like statistical terms, you know, our thesis is that incentive alignment between token holders and traders is manifested by a positive correlation between these two, you know, activity, or, you know, these two properties of an Ethereum address. And right now there is no like real discernible correlation between, you know, owning ZRX and trading. Yeah, like, you know, if you look along these axes, these are all, you know, people that have traded but never, you know, don't own any ZRX, and then, you know, people that own ZRX but have never traded. So we really want to create like a positive correlation between, like a pretty strong positive correlation between these two properties. So that's kind of that's what we want to achieve. And that's kind of how we're defining incentive alignment. And so beyond incentive alignment, there's a few other things that we kind of set as high-level objectives for the network economics proposal. But yeah, just going through it again. So, you know, the incentives should be structured such that ZRX token distribution converges on the class of users that supply liquidity to the network. So Peter wrote a really great blog post on blockchain governance, and talks about kind of in the context of ZeroX, there's like three classes of users. and the relayers, the market makers, and the takers. And he's gonna write, he's gonna talk more about this later on when we release this. But for a variety of reasons, we want the market makers to have a financial stake in the network. And so, for us, again, incentive alignment is market makers owning or at least having voting power via ZRX tokens. So we need to provide a financial incentive to market makers for that to happen. And that financial incentive should scale in proportion to the amount of liquidity they provide, as well as the amount of ZRX tokens they stake relative to their peers. Which I feel like this is like pretty intuitive, but if anyone has questions or comments, feel free to just jump in at any time. Our second objective is sustainability. So right now, pretty much all of the core development work is done by 0x Inc. It's our team. We're employed by a Delaware C corporation, and we're using funds that were generously given to us by the community to develop out this infrastructure. But eventually we're going to run out of money, or the community will run out of money. Basically, there needs to be a way for the community to sustain itself. And by sustain itself, I mean to sustain development of the core protocol, to sustain growth initiatives within the ecosystem. And so, we propose that basically there is a protocol fee, a small protocol fee that is charged on every single trade. It's levied on the taker. It's equal in value to the transaction fee they pay to the miner. Well, it's equal to the transaction fee you pay to the miner for filling one specific order. And basically, those protocol fees are used to fund this, financial incentive for market makers, first of all. And then second of all, this stream of protocol fee, the remaining protocol fees are fed into a community treasury that is controlled by the token holders. And actually it's the voters. And under this model, market makers would have a lot of voting power, but so would other token holders. And so the idea is that we're incentivizing liquidity, but we're also creating a sustainable source of revenue that is owned by the community. It doesn't go to 0x Incorporated. We have no expectation that that funding would be used to pay 0x Incorporated. In the future, it's possible that we could apply for funding or submit proposals, but ultimately these resources belong to the community, and that's how the community can sustain itself long term.
To be clear, that fee is paid in Ether, ZRX?
Yes,
Ether.
it is paid in Ether.
Okay.
It will just be extra Ether sent in with the transaction, so the message dot value, and there'll be some constant, let's say 120,000 gigaway multiplied by the gas price of that transaction.
Yeah. So we'll dig into the details of the liquidity reward and kind of what do these values actually look like in a second. So just the other objectives. So there's these kind of obvious ones. We want everyone to be able to participate. Market makers have a very high cost of capital, and so if other token holders and market makers want to come to some sort of delegation agreement, they can do that. Efficiency. These two constraints kind of limited the number of things we could build when we were first designing the token. But yeah, the incentive mechanism has to be really gas efficient if we put it in a smart contract. Lastly, it needs to kind of reduce the amount of user churn that's going to occur when people are attempting to participate in this incentive mechanism. And then finally, I think this is a really important one. if there is a community treasury that is owned by the community and that the community can spend on public goods, you know, you can't really fork. You can easily fork a protocol, but you can't really fork, you know, a smart contract that contains a pool of funding. And so I think this is like a defense mechanism against what I'm calling like meme forks. So, you know, it's very easy to it's very easy to kind of create a fork of a protocol and, you know, try and rebrand it or create like your own community around it, but without like any real need to do it. And so, you know, if there's an unforkable pool of resources that, you know, and imagine, you know, this community treasury could hold a very significant amount of money that's used to develop the ecosystem. You know, this is kind of a Schelling point, and it reduces the probability that people would be willing to move to an uncontentious fork.
Do you have any numbers in terms of like what that would have collected if it had been in place for the past year and a half that ZRX has been live?
Funny you ask. Yes, definitely do. Yeah, I'm excited to share it with you. So, okay, so let's dive into what is this protocol fee exactly? What so it is it is some ether that is sent to the 0x smart contract when attempting to fill an order, and the amount of ether is equal to 120,000 units of gas, which is approximately the amount of gas it costs to fill a 0x order, like a one order, a standard order. And you multiply that by the gas price that the taker is paying in transaction fees to the miner. And so, you know, if we were to, look at that distribution, what does that look like over the last year and a half? So this is you know, collecting all historical trades on 0x, looking at the gas price for each trade, and multiplying that gas price by the, you know, exchange rate, ETH USD exchange rate at the time that that order was filled. Then we end up with a protocol fee that's expressed in US dollars. And so that's what we see here is a distribution of protocol fees in US dollars. So this is how much the taker is paying in order to fill that order, or to fill, you know, one of the trades that occurred in the past. And then on the y-axis, it's the number of trades to occur at a specific protocol fee price, I guess you could call it. Is that clear? Or let me add, is this unclear to anyone so far? Okay, cool. So what's really interesting here is, sorry, go ahead. So what's really interesting here?
I was saying it makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I think intuitively you can see that pretty, you know, for a large majority of the trades, you're going to be paying like a very small amount to fill an order. But there are some times when there are very, very high gas prices, and so that's fun part that we'll get into right after this section. Okay, so if we were to take all of these protocol fees that have ever occurred and add them all up, the total would equal a little over $400,000. So that's like a pretty significant amount. So we're being conservative. We're, you know, calculating the amount of ether that's being spent, limiting it to 120,000 gas, which is low. I think it's a pretty conservative number. So, you know, I imagine that the total amount of money spent on 0x trades in terms of transaction fees is like probably quite a bit bigger than this number, which is kind of interesting. Okay, so that's the input to the staking system. So, you know, you generate every single trade generates a small protocol fee. It's fed into this staking contract, and then market makers that stake ZRX tokens earn a liquidity reward And these rewards are paid out over fixed periods of time, or between fixed periods of time called epochs. So basically, before an epoch begins, you want to stake your ZRX tokens, lock them into this staking smart contract. You can't move them during the course of the epoch, but you just engage in trading activity, you market make, you provide liquidity, and over time, people are filling your orders and they're paying these protocol fees into the pool. And so the way that we, at the end of the epoch, we divvy up this pool of ether that has accumulated from all of the trades, and we divvy it up between the market makers that are staking ZRX tokens. And so, the liquidity reward that market maker I would receive is dictated by this equation. So this is the Cobb-Douglas production function. You can ask Peter about it. He's, it's some economics. It's very popular in economics, apparently. But it's a really nice way of divvying up liquidity rewards, because it allows us to kind of weigh, we get to weigh the value of the reward between the amount that market maker is staking relative to all of the other ZRX, or all of the other market makers staking. So if I have 100 ZRX staked, ZI is 100, and this is like the total of everyone else that's staking. And the amount of protocol fees that are paid into the pool from orders that I originate as a market maker is T sub I. So to be clear, I'm a market maker, I generate an order, and some taker comes and fills it, and that taker pays a fee to the pool. But when the taker pays that fee, it's recorded or attributed to me as the market maker. And then this is divided by the entire value of all protocol fees. And then there's this weighting parameter that kind of shifts how heavily one ratio is balanced against the other. And then R hat is the total size of the pool, but the additional, R could be larger than T hat, because T hat is all of the protocol fees that are paid into this liquidity pool. R hat is that plus, there could be like subsidies that are placed in the pool, or basically we're just allowing other sort of inputs to be put there. Okay. So this is the Cobb-Douglas production function plotted. And so I think this kind of gives some intuition for what's going on with this function and what does this weighting parameter alpha do. So alpha is a number that is between 0 and 1, and it dictates how heavily we weight someone's stake versus how heavily we weight their kind of contribution to the liquidity pool by market making. And so if we go to either extreme, so with alpha equal to 0, we see that staking ZRX does not matter. You will see no financial benefit from staking ZRX, and basically this incentive mechanism is just kind of accepting protocol fees as they come in and just kind of spitting them right back out to the market maker. In the other extreme, with alpha equal to 1, providing liquidity doesn't matter at all, and basically it's just token holders extracting a rent on all trading activity. So you don't, as a token holder, you don't have to do anything. You're basically just getting a dividend, and that's not, that's definitely not the point of the token at all. It's, the last thing we want is people that are, focused on value extraction controlling the governance process. We want people that are focused on value creation, dictating governance. And then if you set alpha to 0.5, you get this curve, and there's some like really nice properties here. So basically, if you provide zero liquidity, so if you're not making any orders, you're not going to get any sort of reward. So only market makers are going to be getting these liquidity rewards. If you stake zero ZRX tokens, you also earn zero reward. So you have to be market making, and you have to be staking ZRX tokens. And if you are staking ZRX tokens, then your reward will increase as you supply more liquidity. And if you do supply liquidity, then your reward will increase as you stake more ZRX tokens. So it's like pretty intuitive. You basically need to get paid out a higher liquidity reward if you are providing more liquidity and staking more tokens. Another kind of nice property of this design is that it becomes really costly to wash trade or create fake volume. So, I guess like you can't know with 100% certainty, but I feel like I've seen some pretty wacky trading activity on 0x Tracker in the past. So maybe this would cut it down, or if not, then that's fine. They can just pay the community to do it. Another interesting property is that so most cryptocurrency exchanges basically extend discounts and subsidies to high volume traders. But what's really, that's not really what we're shooting for. We want to build a system that treats people equally, in the sense that, if you're a small market maker, you shouldn't be punished. So what's great about this system is that, as a small market maker or a large market maker, you will both kind of benefit proportionally to the amount of liquidity you provide to the network. So you can be a small market maker and stake a very small amount of ZRX and get the full benefits of doing so. Market makers do not financially benefit from joining together, like pooling their ZRX tokens and trading from the same account. Like there's no financial benefit to doing that. So creating a coalition. And they also don't benefit from Sybil attacking or creating multiple fake identities. So what should ultimately end up happening is we'll have many market makers that are staking ZRX tokens. There are big ones, there are small ones. They have different sort of views on how the protocol should evolve, and they're all contributing to governance decisions. How are we doing so far? Is any questions or anything unclear?
So far, I think it sounds really slick.
Awesome. So it gets even cooler. So this is where Peter, very, very happy that we brought Peter on the team. He's our research fellow. He was an econ professor. He's just like, I don't know. He's just like a very clever dude. But so what's interesting about this model is that despite the fact that we're actually imposing a protocol fee on takers, this should actually create smaller spreads than exist today. And which sounds super counterintuitive, but it's true. And this is specifically for, for the open order book model, you should be able to have smaller spreads than you do today, to be explicit. So, basically in this design, if if people are entering into some sort of like gas price auction to fill an order, or I guess like it could be called front running, it could be called a gas price auction, whatever it is. If there's a $50 arbitrage opportunity and multiple arbitrageurs are attempting to fill the order and and get $50 in profit, they'll be willing to spend some fraction of that $50 on gas. And today, under the current system today, 100% of that gas goes to the miner. But under the new kind of the proposed design, they'll still be willing to pay a total of some fraction of $50 for that arbitrage opportunity. But instead of the entire amount of gas going to the miner, 50% of it would be directed back into the reward pool. And so, if you're a market maker staking and you're providing liquidity on open order books, anytime there's like volatility and your order becomes mispriced, and there's an ARB opportunity, then you will still collect a fraction of that arbitrage opportunity in the form of ether that you get from your liquidity reward. And the reason why this is possible is because if you look at the distribution of protocol fees versus trades, you can see out here on the right, there are these just crazy outlier fees that people will pay. Like these are like $60 or $70 fees that people are paying in gas to fill an order, and there are hundreds of them occurring. So people, are paying these big fees. They're doing it hundreds of times, and all of it's going to the miner. And so, basically we can, instead of leaking that out to miners, we can, kind of redirect it back into the system. So it's not like zero sum. It's actually, I suppose if we were to view the system as a zero sum system, we're just taking money that's leaked to miners and redirecting it back to market makers. And what's crazy about this is that, so this is the cumulative distribution function for trades. So any point, if we look at this point, a 10-cent protocol fee, we see that 65%, 60% of all trades, pay less than 10 cents on the protocol fee. And we also see that like 25% of the total reward pool is generated by trades that pay a protocol fee less than 10 cents. But what's really interesting is the difference between these two curves, because this tells us something very interesting. So if we look here at the $1 protocol fee mark, 99.9% of all trades pay less than $1 in protocol fees, but that 0.1% of all trades that are above $1 in protocol fees, those represent almost a third of the entire reward pool. So 1/1000th of all trades are generating a third of all protocol fees that go back to market makers. So it's pretty interesting, and it really shows the impact of gas price auctions on all these permissionless DEX systems today. Uniswap, Kyber, Bancor, open order book, all of these things are leaking a ton of value to miners, arbitrage value to miners. So, okay, I've been going on for a really long time now, but that's kind of the overall design. Those are the economics involved. And I think if we have time, I think Greg can talk about sort of the smart contract architecture. But I also want to leave time for questions. Yeah. So maybe we can do some questions now.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of information there, so it would be really good to have a discussion if there are any questions for sure.
Is there a specific percentage of fees that will go to the community treasury versus what gets paid back to staking makers, or is that?
Yeah. Let me show you. So It depends upon how efficiently tokens are allocated to market makers. So if, for all market makers, these two ratios are identical, then 100% of the reward pool goes to market makers. If there's any sort of variation in these fractions, these pairs of fractions, then that creates a small inefficiency, and it will kind of like leak some small amount into the community treasury.
Okay. Might it make sense to have some cap where like some percent goes to the community treasury, regardless, and that at that if those values were perfect, then maybe 80% or 90% goes back to the makers, but the community treasury always gets something.
Yeah, that sounds like a really great idea. I think Peter mentioned, yeah, I guess like we could just, the reward function, we could just multiply, R could just be 0.9 times T or 0.8 times T or something like that. But yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I think also in practice, it's never going to happen that everyone is, staking exactly proportional to their volume. They're just going to be casual makers and stuff like that who won't stake, and it won't really affect them.
Hey, you don't have to stake to make. You just don't get rewards if you don't.
Exactly. But if you do that, there's still going to be this fee, but that's just going to essentially go directly into the community fund.
How would you compare this to Uniswap?
In terms of like the fee model or the...
Yeah.
So Uniswap's really interesting. So Uniswap, the payouts are based on how much volume is occurring within a certain price range. And, potential sources of loss are, exchange rates drifting in one direction for an extended period of time. So I guess put another way, like low frequency price movements will lose money for you as a market maker, and small high frequency, price movement will make you money. So there was someone released like a Twitter post or blog post or something about, I think it was a blog post about how Uniswap is, you're basically taking a derivatives, a position in two derivatives, two options. It's called a collar position, where you're simultaneously buying an option that indicates you think the price is going to go up, and you also buy one indicating that you think the price is going to go down, and you're basically betting on volatility, not increasing, or the price not moving out of a certain range. And so with Uniswap, your payout is you're basically like taking a weird kind of derivative position on the assets that are being traded, if that makes sense. But in terms of like how does this system compare? I think it's a lot different. So one of the things that's really compelling to me is that, if there's a $50 arbitrage opportunity between any of these kind of permissionless dexes like Uniswap, and if you saw an order on an open order book, basically, for Uniswap, all of that gas that's spent on the arbitrage opportunity is lost to the miner, and the money that's spent on filling the 0x order for that arbitrage opportunity will end up going to this pool that goes back to market makers. So it's, I guess put another way, like arbitrage opportunities are basically just like massive profit engines for miners. They don't even have to do anything. They just get paid a ton of money because there exists some sort of arbitrage opportunity in between tokens or in the market. And all of it's just kind of leaked out to the miner. But with this new design, 0x should be theoretically like, able to provide much. You should be able to provide much better spreads as a market maker on an open order book compared to other kind of permissionless dexes.
I want to address some of the questions in the chat before we take any more. So there's one question. Will from ETHFinex wonders what percentage of these high gas price transactions were simply mistakes as opposed to sniper arbs? Yeah, I'm sure there are probably a few mistakes in there. It's probably pretty hard to manually parse each of those, but we've definitely seen many arb transactions paying pretty high dollar amounts of gas. And yeah, just anecdotally, there are some very sophisticated R bots out there. I don't know if anyone has seen the website frontrun.me. Actually, not even sure if it's still up, but it kind of shows you all of the historical gas auctions that have happened on, I believe, Ether Delta. I'm not sure what decentralized exchanges are included in there.
Yeah, so actually, coincidentally, Phil Dyan, who wrote Front Run to Me, just published this paper today, I believe. Oh, wait. Never mind. I guess he's going to publish it later. Sorry, don't share that publicly, anyone.
And then the next question, so what about closed relayers? Will they be paying this to the protocol as well? Yeah, so this is going to affect closed relayers a little bit differently. So in this case, the relayer is actually the one matching orders, and they will be the ones who are paying the fee. If you are a maker trading on a closed relayer, you're still going to be able to collect rewards for that. You could potentially collect rewards for that as a taker as well, since you're just submitting a maker order. So that would kind of be the equivalent of like going to an open order book relayer, and then rather than filling an order, you just place a limit order that's through the market and wait for someone to match that. So you could kind of do this with either the open or closed model. It shouldn't make any difference. But for closed relayers, they're basically going to want to account for this fee in their prices when they're accepting orders to be matched. So they're most likely going to handle it in the exact same way that they handle gas currently. I think most relayers do add an additional markup for that. And this should be no different since the fee scales with the gas price. You're essentially just doubling the gas cost of a transaction. Any other questions?
Do we? Oh, nice.
So the question, have you done modeling on the 0x token price, i.e. assume this will scale with the protocol usage? So we've done some modeling, some economic modeling on, supply and demand for the token for market makers that are doing different amounts of trading activity. What it'll do to the token price, honestly, that's just like not our prerogative with this, and I don't think it should be. So we want to bring liquidity to the network because that is ultimately what makes the network even worth existing. So the token incentive is a very powerful tool, and I think that we should use it to incent liquidity. That being said, I don't know. I have no idea what it would do to the price, but I imagine that it would be better than the current design.
Okay. So there's another question here about swapping NFTs and what type of fee you would pay. So the fee you pay depends entirely on the gas price of the transaction. So if it's kind of like a casual, if it's an NFT marketplace and transactions aren't happening that frequently and you're okay with waiting like a minute or whatever to fill your order, you could just fill that with, you know, a very small gas price, like 1 gig away or something like that. And I don't know exactly what that is in dollar terms today, but it's probably something like 1 cent. But generally, you know, higher priority trades are going to cost more just because you want them to get filled more quickly. That makes sense.
Yeah, so the 19 cents number was that was like the median gas price. So yeah, 50% of trades paid less, not gas price, protocol fee. 50% of trades paid less than 19 cents on the protocol fee, and 50% paid higher than that. Yes, and that is correct that 120 gas is approximately, it's probably slightly below the average amount of gas spent on filling one 0x order. It varies because different tokens, you know, have different implementations. And yeah. How long is an epoch period? Will there be a gap between epochs? So that is TBD. So again, like this is a proposal and it's like a request for comment. So ideally, when we put this up on the ZEIP up on GitHub, we can have like a sane, you know, conversation about what these parameters should be. But I imagine, so, you know, votes are going to take place during the epoch while tokens are locked. So if you're going to vote on some sort of ZIP or proposal, your ZRX tokens are staked, they're locked. You vote with those staked locked tokens, and ideally, you know, an epoch would be long enough such that you have time to vote on a proposal, and then the proposal has time to kind of like take effect. So, you know, if you vote for something malicious, it's going to impact the price of the token in a negative way or something, for example, then you would still have that kind of financial exposure to the damage you're doing.
At the same time, though, if you vote against something malicious and it passes anyway, you're still stuck.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about like a way to allow for forks of the actual smart contract pipeline, and that would be kind of similar to Augur. So Augur has this fork choice rule. I think that is a way to resolve like super contentious disagreements that can't be resolved through anything besides a fork. But yeah, to some degree, the people that, you know, people are going to have to disagree and commit to certain decisions that are made by the community. So not everyone's going to get what they want.
And it could be that if you vote yes, your tokens are just locked for a longer period than if you vote no. Or sorry, if you're on the winning side of the vote, your tokens are locked for longer than if you're on the losing side of the vote. I think that's what a lot of governance protocols do. But yeah, in general, we're working on the smart contract design, closing in on what we think the high level design would look like. I think we're gonna save that for next meeting. Probably publish something before then, just because we're pretty much out of time for today.
Last question by David Akari, though. Will there be slashing of stakes for any reason? No, I don't think there will be. Or there is no reason to as of right now. Sorry, I didn't even mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to make sure to get to the last question.
Yeah, no worries.
So we're doing another ecosystem chat a month from today? So
yeah, 4 weeks from today. Just keep an eye out for emails. If there's demand for it, could potentially do a call specifically about this before then.
Sweet.
So in terms of, I guess, further communication, what should the community expect? Like, where would it be a good place to ask some additional questions once we've thought about this, and kind of talk about it with the other members in the ecosystem?
So, there's going to be a few things that we release, and it's gonna. I think we're planning to do it Thursday. So we're releasing an economic analysis of the incentive mechanism. It's much more technical, and it goes into kind of some of the more interesting modeling of the incentive mechanism. That'll be shared on our research forum, and discussion should take. Yeah, here we go. So Raul just shared a link to the forum, and the kind of smart contract implementation and spec will, that conversation should take place on the GitHub ZEIP, and then we'll probably do like an AMA or something on Reddit. And then I think that's it. So I guess just for clarity, so we asked people to keep the conversation here confidential. I don't, we wanted to share this with everyone on this call first, because I mean, ultimately, like, this entire project and ecosystem doesn't exist without you, and nothing really should change, in my opinion, if it doesn't feel like it's beneficial in the eyes of the people that are actually in the ecosystem building with 0x, using 0x. So we wanted to share with the folks here today, and I don't imagine that this is going to remain confidential, so it's it's not the end of the world. But we are planning to actually communicate this on Thursday, so we would appreciate if you were somewhat discreet about kind of. We don't want to have a bunch of questions coming in while we're still working on polishing up a couple of things. So, and that's it from my end.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll call it for today.